and we move to Herbert Gintis. Like the first speaker, he changed subject early in his career. Herb got a BA in mathematics from the University of Pennsylvania and later an MA in mathematics from Harvard. And then he stayed on in Harvard to do a PhD in economics. And the title was Alienation and Power Towards a Radical Welfare Economics. He is noted for his foundational views on altruism, cooperation, geneculture, evolution, and so on. He's an editor of the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, and he's currently professor at the Central European University and an external professor at the Santa Fe Institute. And his title today is Towards the Unification of the Behavioral Sciences.
Thank you. It's totally wonderful to be here and see so many interested people. I did change the title of my talk and the substance of my talk to something for a more general audience, and I'm calling this Evolution and Morality. What I want to do is give you a very quick overview of a lot of what's been happening in what's called sociobiology, which is understanding species that are social in a biological evolutionary way, of which humans are one species. I'm mostly going to talk about humans, because I know most of that's what I study. Those of you who are interested, there are two books that I've done. One's Bounds of Reason is more economics, game theory, sociology. The second isn't quite out yet. It's more anthropology and biology. And the basic question is, how do we explain why and how exactly humans are cooperative? And our answer to this is that humans are cooperative because they're in part altruistic. That is, people are willing to take a hit in order to help other people, even when they can't expect to get some personal return for it or even some family return for it. I want to start out with a traditional view, which I learned when I was in school, and probably you did too, traditional view of human nature in, say, a sociology course or a political philosophy course. Evolution gave humans large brains. The brain is empty at birth. This is Locke's blank slate, tabula rasa. The brain is filled with culture, including moral principles. If it's imperfectly filled, we say it's an aberrant individual or a pathology or a pervert or something. Didn't work out quite right, didn't fill up right. Human society equals big brain plus culture. Evolutionary theory is irrelevant to the study of human society because culture and morality have nothing to do with evolution. Once you get the big brain, you no longer have to worry about evolution. You have to worry about how you fill the brain with culture, and that has no evolutionary content or component. Now, I know that that's a bit of a caricature, but I can assure you it's not much of a caricature. That's how I learned it. In political theory, I'll just give you a couple of quotes. This is very, very famous and beautiful. The state of men, meaning men and women, without civil society, which may be called the state of nature, is nothing but a war of all against all, where every man is enemy to every man. The life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Of course, that's Thomas Hobbes. In other words, the idea is without so-called civilization, people are brutes. They're nasty to each other, they're selfish, they don't care about each other, they're constantly at war, and obviously, therefore, their life is short, nasty, and brutish, etc. Here's, by the way, I would love to have time to go into this, but this whole idea of human beings as selfish is at the basis of much of population biology of the latter half of the 20th century, right up to the present. This is Richard Dawkins, very famous. I could give you a dozen more, even more poetic. This is Richard Dawkins. We are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. Let us try to teach generosity and altruism, because we are born selfish. Now, of course, those of you who have studied infant development or child development know that that's just a factual error. We are not born selfish. Even babies have other regarding preferences and are not completely self-interested. Now, Now I'm going to give you what I call, ta-da, the modern view. Human morality is the product of an evolutionary dynamic involving the interactions of genes and culture. What's very special about humans is that that society can have an aggregation of an accumulation of cultural capital and goods so that culture can grow over time with humans. That's not true of any other species. Even where there is culture, it's not accumulative. In this dynamic, humans transform culture, and their new culture makes new behaviors fitness enhancing. In other words, when you have a new social system, there are new rewards and penalties for different behaviors, and therefore there are newer rewards and penalties for different genes. So culture then changes the direction of genetic development in humans. Genes are the product of culture, just as culture is the product of genes. This is called gene-culture coevolution. In this view, morality is predicated upon a set of evolved human predispositions. It's not arbitrary. It's not completely society-centered. There are communalities of culture across all known societies, although there are differences. The blank slate view of John Locke is thus profoundly incorrect. Now, I want to give you an example, and I want to give you an example that's very easy to understand, although it's not what I would say is the most important. It's I think, the most immediately comprehensible, and that's the evolution of the physiology of speech. I could spend half an hour on this, but I won't. You can Google it or Bing it and get the details. The heightened value of communication in the Pleistocene, several 100,000 years ago, to the present, almost to the present, when humans emerged, rewarded genetic changes that facilitate speech. The motor cortex expanded, that's completely obvious, to permit speech production. Nerves and you can actually trace in the fossil record the development of the channels for the nerves and muscles to the mouth, larynx, and tongue, which grow a lot. Moreover, more important and more interesting is the larynx of humans is way down in the throat. And that's necessary to produce a long vocal tract and therefore to produce consonants. Monkeys and primates can't make consonants. They make vowels. Of course, parrots can make consonants, but that's for a different story. The fact that we have a low larynx means that we can choke on our food. A chimpanzee can't choke on its food. An infant can't choke on its food. An infant can breathe and eat at the same time. But as an infant becomes 1.5 years old, the larynx lowers down, and the tubes to the lungs and to the stomach have to share the throat. Now, these are very costly genetic adaptations. But the benefits are cultural. That is, because you have an individual who could speak better, evidently had more children, more offspring. Groups that had lots of subtle communications with each other did better than groups that had to use very crude forms of communication. So I won't go through the details, and there's many of them. Tremendous transformation of the physiology of humans because of communication. Now, this is culture changing genes. I could also do it for audition. Similarly, for facial muscles. Humans have many, many more facial muscles than any primate. And we use them to communicate. Now, that's my example. But I want to apply it and say it applies also more generally to many human characteristics. For instance, the so-called emotional capacities or social emotions, shame. Shame, as far as we know, exists in every single society ever studied, and there are thousands of them. Hunter-gatherer societies, there are at least 1,500. The same physiology in every society. The sweating, the lowering of the eyes, the hunching, all of those are the same. Now, of course, people are shamed by different things in different societies, but the physiology is the same. Pride, empathy. We have mirror neurons that allow us to experience the feelings of others when we see them behaving in certain ways, almost by direct brain-to-brain communication. Primates have mirror neurons, but they're not associated with psychological events. They're associated with physical events like grasping. And a taste for retribution, jealousy. And by the way, when you study social theory, you almost never learn about the taste for retribution. Think about your social psychology or sociology course. It's not even in the book. It's not even there that people want to hurt people who hurt them. It's crazy. If you go to the movies, there are only two major themes in all of cinema. One is love, and the other is retribution. It's an absolutely basic human emotion, never discussed. Humans are altruistic and cooperative to a degree unknown in other species because they are altruistic and cooperative with people who are not close genetic relatives, with absolute strangers. This accounts for our evolutionary success as a species. Now I'm going to give you an example. Honesty. Why would humans be unconditionally honest, as opposed to being honest only where it pays off and ruthlessly dishonest when you can get away with it? How could that possibly have evolved? Why doesn't someone who's just honest when it serves its purposes not beat out someone who, is just, well, I'm just honest, I do the right thing. That sounds stupid. Why don't we teach our kids? Now, Jimmy, if somebody's looking, you be honest. If nobody's looking, take the little old lady's bag and run like hell. We never teach our kids that. Numerous experiments indicate that most human subjects are willing to sacrifice material reward to maintain a virtuous character, even in one-shot encounters with perfect anonymity. That is, when they're engaged with another human being, anonymity means the other person, no one will ever discover what they do except themselves. They know themselves when they come out what they did. And it's only once, so you can't have any reputation effects, strategy, etc. Now, I'm going to go through an example of this to give you an idea of how we actually try to prove things like this using what's called behavioral game theory in the laboratory and in the field. This is about 3 decades old. The first real behavioral game theory experiment was in 1982. This is a study by Herbert Gintis, 2005. He has a whole bunch of subjects, but they're paired off into twos. The twos never see each other. It's purely anonymous. They're going to play once this game, and then they'll never see each other again, or at the end. Call the two players Bob and Alice. The genders are irrelevant, and the names are fictitious. Bob is shown 2 options. Option A pays him $5, and Alice $6. Option B reverses the payoffs. Alice can't see the options, but she must choose one based on Bob's advice, which she's free to ignore. Bob then chooses one of 2 sentences. He can't say anything else. He can't say, for instance, I'd be really happy if you chose option A. Or God says choose option A. He can only say option A will pay you more than option B, or option B will pay you more than option A. So he can either tell the truth or lie. If he lies and Alice believes him, he gains $1. Alice then chooses option A or B, and the money is paid out. Now, in this experiment, 83% of Bobs told the truth. For $1, I'm not going to lie. Now, I'm not going to go through this because I don't have time. If you raise the cost of lying, more and more people drop out, they start lying. But some people never lie, no matter what the costs are. So, and this is the way we think of how humans behave. Morality is just part of what we prefer. We prefer to be honest. It's like being clean. Clean is nice. It feels good. It's part of our preference structure. But if it gets too expensive, then you're not going to be clean. If they charge you, £4 to get some, soap in the lavatory, you'll probably not use the soap. At any rate, many such experiments show that people value virtue for its own sake. Not just honesty, but trustworthiness and loyalty and other traits. Conclusion, people are generally not selfish, even when they can behave selfishly with complete impunity. Now, that doesn't mean people don't care about themselves. They do. But they also have other regarding preferences that they put value on under certain circumstances. Some people, by the way, in experiments are completely selfish. They always go for whatever maximizes their own return. It's usually about 20% in kind of Western Europe, the United States. Now, here's another game that I'm going to do, a very simple game that talks about retribution, punishing. It's called the ultimatum game. There are two subjects. Again, anonymous, never repeated. They never see each other, and they only play once. The first player is called the proposer and is given $10, say. It could be $100. It's been as high as a 3-month salary. It doesn't make any difference. The proposer is given $10, known to both players, and instructed to offer none, some, or all to the second player, who's called the responder, who can then accept or reject the offer. A responder who accepts receives the amount of the offer he's offered, and the proposer gets the rest. So if the responder is offered $3 and he says okay, the responder gets $3, the proposer gets $7. Game's over, everybody goes home, nobody ever saw each other even. A responder rejects, they both get nothing. Okay, so if you reject, you don't get anything, but neither does the proposer. Now, if you do a little economic analysis, you'll realize that if the proposer thinks the responder is selfish, self-interested, self-regarding, he'll offer him the minimum possible amount, which is usually $1, and the responder will say, well, it's better than nothing, he'll take the $1. In fact, results with subjects in many countries, the modal offers are 50% of the total. That means the most common offer is to give the other guy half. Offers of less than 30% are commonly rejected. The results do not change when the amount of money is very large, 3-month salary. Rejections are thus a means of punishing the antisocial, unjust behavior of the proposer. Now, I know I would need another 10 minutes to convince you of that by other experiments, but I think I could convince you that the reason the guy rejects the bad offer is almost always because he wants to hurt the proposer. So this is a good example of pure vindictiveness. There's no reputation effect. No one will ever know what you did. You can, why not accept the $3 and then go home and say, you know, that jerk offered me $3 and I rejected it. Well, because we want to be honest. See, so these fit together. Why do we vote? I mean, it's a silly thing to do. Your vote can't count for anything. And why don't you just lie and go home and say, yes, dear, I certainly did vote. It was wonderful. I feel like a really good citizen, you know. Okay, final game. Very quickly, the public goods game. 5 players are given, again, $10, 10 euros, 10 shekels, whatever. Each can allocate some or all to, or none, to a common pool called the public account. The experimenter multiplies the public account by 3 and distributes it equally to all 5 players. In other words, every dollar you put in, the group gets $3. However, you only get 60 cents, which is $3 divided by 5, I hope. So the best thing to do if you're selfish is don't put any money into the common pool. It's the public, we call this the public goods game because it really measures the willingness of people to sacrifice for the common good. It costs them, but it helps everybody else a lot more. It's like, you know, cleaning up rubbish after yourself, etc. Subjects contribute on average about half of their money to the pool. However, in other words, half their money to the pool. However, if you repeat the game 10 times with the same subjects, they put in less and less over time until in the final round they're putting in almost nothing. Why? Well, I cannot prove this for you now. I don't have time. But there have been tons of experiments that prove the following. The deterioration in cooperation occurs because contributors are retaliating against non-contributors in the only way they possibly can, by not contributing themselves. In other words, the good guys get pissed off at the bad guys, and it's called the unraveling of cooperation. This was proved in one way by Fair and Gechter 2000 American Economic Review, also Nature 2002, by allowing subjects actually to retaliate against free riders at a cost to themselves. So after each round, they'd show on a computer screen who contributed what, and I can push a button, and for $1, I can punish this guy $2. Self-interested agents would never press the button. Why should they spend their money, you know? I can't prove that, but if I had time, I could prove it. That if you're self-interested, you'll never punish, and therefore, everyone should free ride. And the level of cooperation should still be 0. But what actually happened? This is, to me, one of the most important graphs in my life when I saw this. This is Nature 2002. My mic is not on here. With punishment for 10 rounds, well, this died. See? Modern technology there. With punishment, you get cooperation rising from about 55% to 90% for 10 rounds. Then they took away the option to punish, and all of a sudden, blam. After 2 rounds, you're way below even the original. And after the 10th round, you're down to around 15%. Something like that, 20%. And this has been replicated many times. And it's, I think, a basic story of human behavior. It's almost like the reason society works is not because the law punishes you for every bad thing you do. The policeman, the gendarme comes around and watches you. It's because we're all punishing ourselves all the time for making mistakes. And we're all very careful about how we behave. And also, by the way, we feel shame. And this is another thing I could show you. I'd love to show you. I don't have time. That if you punish people, not even with money, just register, I don't like what you did. That also is sufficient to give rise to a high level of cooperation. It's not as powerful as money, but it's something. People feel shame when they're criticized. Now what we tried to do here is take these games and take them into other types of societies, what we call small-scale societies, mostly hunter-gatherer societies. The book is Joe Henrich, senior author, Foundations of Human Sociality, Ethnographic and Experiments in 15 Small-Scale Societies. They range from, again, my pointer doesn't work, top left are herders, Mongolian herders, very rich. I'd die for one of those hats, I must say. In the lower right, you get also herders in Kenya. The lower left, down here, these are hunter-gatherers. He's got a blowgun with poison in it, and he's shooting a monkey for lunch. And this is his dog's going to go get the monkey. And this is a Hadza hunter-gatherer in Tanzania. Gorgeous guy. And very briefly, I can't do all the societies. We did 15. Here's one group, the Ache. The Ache are eastern Paraguay, hunter-gatherers. Regionally, now they're settled foragers, but their whole culture is hunter-gatherer. They're very cooperative. And notice that they are extremely egalitarian. Almost everyone offers 40 or 50% in the ultimatum game, and their huge offers even above 50%, up in there. So they're very egalitarian, and there are almost no rejections in these societies. Here are 2 other tribes, the Ao and the Ganao, who work together. This is not a Walt Disney movie. They actually dress that way on Sundays or something. They have a culture of gift-giving and obligation for each other. And when they play the ultimatum game, you get really strange results. For one strange result, look at the 70%. The 70? A fair number of people offered 70% of the pie, whatever it was. So it's not money because these cultures don't have money. 70% of the food or what have you. The red is the height of the offers. The blue is the height of the rejections. If somebody offers you 70%, if you offer someone 70% of the pie and you keep 30, they're likely to turn you down. In fact, more than likely, there are more than 50% rejections of those offers. This, of course, was never seen before in any of the other previous studies. And the reason for this is that these are what are called competitive gift-giving societies. If someone offers you a whole lot, you feel humbled and indebted to them. You don't want to be offered a whole lot. You know, who is this guy? He's got some money. He's acting like a big shot. Well, here he goes, you know. Shoot him down. And this is, but the interesting thing is that people bring their emotions and they bring their morality into an anonymous, non-repeated game. And they know it's anonymous. They're no stupider than you or me. They're tested beforehand. They know that no one will ever find out whether they accept or reject. They will never find out who the other person is. They still have values. And their value is, if someone gives me a lot, I feel humbled, and I get angry at them, unless I really need it. I get angry at them, and I strike back at them. So this is another example of the general point in these societies. The last example I'm going to use is Lamellera whale hunters. They're very collective in their production. They all go out on the 18 people in a big boat, and they capture whale. So they're very egalitarian. And you can see here, this is the most egalitarian set of outcomes that has ever been seen. If you look in general, the mean ultimatum game offers, if you look above that line, the sloped line, everything above that means that that particular society proposers offered more than they needed to maximize their income. And there's only really one line below it, the Sangu farmers. And notice that there are farmers. They're not hunter-gatherers. Farmers tend to be very individualistic, and they have farming communities have a lower level of community. Thus, we conclude from this that human societies are predisposed to being egalitarian. And if you want to read about that, read a great book by Chris Bohm called Hierarchy in the Forest. The interplay between egalitarianism and hierarchy in humans is a totally fascinating subject. Morality is universal. People play one-shot anonymous games in ways that reflect the basic norms of everyday life in their society. Now, when I found this out, when the results came back, I was the one who funded this project. Robert Boyd, an anthropologist, funded this project. And when we got the results back, I was stunned. It took me a year to work out what was going on because it was so counterintuitive. It's actually basic sociology. People have values, and they care about them. And even when nobody's looking, they exercise the values that are common in their society. What could be more obvious? Group-level differences. This is my final point. How much time do I have now? Okay. Group-level, what explains differences in how cooperative people are in the ultimatum game in these societies? We found two variables. One was cooperative production. People who work together, like the Lamellera whale hunters, they tend to be very egalitarian. Farmers tend to be relatively inegalitarian because it's individual production. They each have their own plots. But the second, surprisingly enough, is market integration, which means, do people in the society ever go to the market and exchange with others, like take their pigs to the market and buy and sell? Many societies, there is no such interaction. In others, there's high interaction. And the point is, the more market integration there is, the more egalitarian people are. And this surprised a lot of people because when I grew up, when I was young, I was a Marxist, and I learned, that capitalism makes people selfish. Well, that turns out not. I never believed that, by the way. I personally never believed that, although I wouldn't mention it to any of my friends. But this vindicated what I really always thought, which is, well, where do you get movements for equality? Where do you get movements for gender equality or racial equality or tolerance, religious tolerance? In market societies. And maybe Milton Friedman was right to say that capitalism is a prerequisite for freedom. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think there's something really important about the nature of exchange societies where when you exchange with others, you have to take their point of view all the time, continually. You have to put yourselves in their shoes in order to do well in dealing with them. So you become tolerant and flexible, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the things that took away from that. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you.